What are we covering in the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War? Day 138. The Hamas leadership in the Gaza Strip sent messages to the Hamas leadership abroad, authorizing them to be more flexible in the negotiations. A grassroots organization calling itself the Freed Gazans has been gaining momentum in the Gaza Strip. It has been holding protests in the north and southern parts of the Strip, condemning Hamas for abandoning the people as they are being slaughtered. The IDF carried out a substantial operation in the Zeitun area, the southern parts of Gaza City. Intensive gun battles were reported. The al-Quds brigades reported that it targeted IDF soldiers with mortars. The IDF is reportedly planning to reopen the Karni crossing in the central northern parts of the Gaza Strip as part of a pilot to bypass aid distribution coming through the southern parts of the Strip. The United Kingdom is considering stopping its weapons exports to Israel in the event of an IDF invasion in Rafah. Hello everyone, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here to bring you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of February 21st, 2024 in the United States, the morning of February 22nd, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, there was a report published today that the Hamas leadership in the Gaza Strip sent messages to the Hamas leadership abroad, authorizing them to be more flexible in the negotiations. According to the report, Hamas may now be willing to negotiate a partial deal rather than the full, complete deal that it demanded before, as well as lowering the amount of Palestinian prisoners that will be released, at least in the first phase of the deal. In addition, it was reported that Hamas may be willing to postpone the final demands of IDF withdrawal and a complete ceasefire in the Gaza Strip to a later date. Amidst this, Ismail Haniyeh, the external leader of Hamas, is currently in Cairo with a delegation that includes Khalil al-Hayya, who is the deputy leader of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Israel is reportedly awaiting to hear about developments in this meeting, stating that depending on the results of Hamas's discussion in Cairo, Israel may agree to participate in the ongoing negotiations. Relating to these ongoing negotiations, it was reported today that another Paris summit is due to occur this weekend. It is again going to be attended by CIA Director William Barnes, Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed Athani, and Egyptian Intelligence Minister Abbas Kamel. Israel has not agreed to send a delegate yet. However, it is very likely that it is going to come under monumental pressure from the United States to send a delegation, and it is very probable that it will do so. However, officially it is still waiting to hear about the results from the Cairo meeting. Other news related to the hostage situation, the French Foreign Ministry stated today that it received confirmation that 45 hostages received the medicines that they were supposed to receive as a result of the medical deal back in the middle of January. This matches the reports that were published in Qatar yesterday. In both Qatar's statement and in the French Foreign Ministry statement, no proof was given, and part of the deal was that Hamas was supposed to supply proof that the hostages got the medications. In Israel, it is stated that the announcements are being reviewed. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there was an attempted mortar fire from the north parts of the Gaza Strip targeting southern parts of Israel today. The mortars did not cross over into Israeli territory. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip in Jabalia refugee camp, the Israeli Air Force targeted a unit that was firing mortars into Israel. That unit I stated moments ago. It was reportedly killed. In addition, the al-Quds brigades of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad reported firing mortars at IDF soldiers in Jabalia refugee camp as well. In addition to this, the IDF carried out a substantial operation in the area of Zeitun. These are the southern parts of Gaza City and the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Reportedly, there were intensive gun battles in the area as the IDF took over weapons storage areas, uncovering substantial weaponry. Dozens of air raids were also reported as part of the attack, targeting lookout posts, weapons warehouses, as well as Hamas underground infrastructure. During the operation, the al-Quds brigades reported firing mortars at IDF soldiers in the areas of Zeitun as well. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, a missile attack was reported in the town of Deir el-Balah. 6 Palestinians were reported killed in this missile attack. It was not reported what the target of the presumed assassination was. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, where the bulk of the fighting is in Khan Yunis, the IDF reported today that it had uncovered a substantial strategic tunnel in the area, including sleeping quarters, electrical infrastructures, as well as water connections. The tunnel is reportedly over a kilometer long and part of a larger network of tunnels in the region. As the IDF was taking it over, face-to-face gun battles within the tunnel were reported. Eventually, the IDF took it over, and it has been destroyed as of today. In addition to this, the Al-Qassam brigades reported firing Yasin 105 anti-tank missiles at an IDF personnel carrier in the Al-Amal neighborhood in the western parts of Khan Yunis. It was not reported if anyone was injured in this particular attack. Other IDF activity was also reported in the eastern parts of Khan Yunis, where more gun battles were reported. The IDF has not operated as intensively in the eastern outskirts of Khan Yunis, so this may be where the IDF is turning its attention as of now. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. CNN quoted sources in the Biden administration today, stating that the administration is working around the clock to try to reach a hostage deal and a ceasefire before the beginning of Ramadan. Ramadan is due to begin in March 10th. The report added that if the invasion of Rafah occurs, then the deal will be off the table, and that it appears that Prime Minister Netanyahu is unwilling to make a deal at this stage. Relating to this, Al-Ahbar quoted Egyptian sources today, also stating that Egypt is trying to put pressure on Israel to postpone the Rafah invasion for a few weeks, granting the month of Ramadan as a time to evacuate civilians safely, and adding that if the invasion into Rafah occurs before the deal is concluded, the deal will be off the table. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. An organization calling itself the Gaza Liberators, or the Freed of Gaza, has been gaining momentum in the Gaza Strip. According to reports, this is a grassroots organization that has been organizing protests against Hamas almost every night in the areas of Rafah and Jabalia refugee camps, all the way from the southern parts of the Gaza Strip to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Today, the movement was very active on its Telegram channel, published pictures showing protests and movies showing the chants, as well as publishing messages calling on Hamas leaders, and I quote, "Climb down from the trees and save us. Save what's left of us from the Jewish massacre." And in different parts adds, "We have no planes protecting us, no bomb shelters, no tunnels, and no fancy hotels in Qatar or in Turkey. Save what's left of us. It is your responsibility." So since the war began, there have been several reports of different spontaneous protests that erupted in different areas, though in which people were calling and chanting against Hamas. However, this seems to be the first organized movement that appears to be from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. It remains to be seen how much momentum it carries. It was explicitly reported today that they were handing out leaflets in public in the areas of Rafah, which also indicates both the growth in their momentum as well as the weakening of Hamas's grip on the population. Other news, the IDF reported today that Operation Atlantis, which was the code name for the IDF pilot in which it tried to flood underground infrastructure with seawaters, has been successful. It was not reported that the IDF is going to expand this operation further, since it requires substantial equipment to be mobilized from place to place. However, it was reported at least that no damage was caused, and that where they carried out the pilot, the IDF is satisfied with the results. Other news, after the battle missive that the IDF Chief of Staff published yesterday, in which he reminded IDF soldiers that they are not there to carry out genocide or in order to carry out revenge, today the Chief Prosecutor of the IDF published her own message. Titled, "Fighting and Winning According to the Law," it states that unlike the enemies of the IDF, and I quote, "fights according to the law, utilizing force only when necessary, distinguishing between enemies and uninvolved citizens." It also adds that there have been some acts of the IDF that violated rules and bordered on criminal acts, and that they will be investigated and prosecuted according to the law. So again, this appears to be another reaction to the injunction that the ICJ has leveled against Israel, saying that Israel needs to report to the ICJ what it is doing in order to make sure that its soldiers do not violate international law. Yesterday, the Chief of Staff put out that message. Today, the Chief Prosecutor put out this message. According to some reports that came in right before recording this, there is a lot of disgruntled units in the IDF who feel that these messages are belittling them and are stating that they are violating against the law. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldier was reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 238. There were also no reports made of any injuries of IDF soldiers in the Gaza Strip, leaving the number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 1,396. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that 118 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 29,313. 69,333 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Moving on to the humanitarian situation, Jordan and the United Kingdom carried out an operation today where they jointly paradropped 4 tons of medical supplies and equipment in the Tel el-Halawa hospital in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. According to reports, the equipment included medicines, fuel, and food supplies. It was not explicitly stated this was coordinated with the IDF. However, the IDF does control the entire airspace of the Gaza Strip, thus one can only assume that it was coordinated with the IDF. Other news, the IDF is reportedly planning to reopen the Karni crossing in the central northern parts of the Gaza Strip as part of a pilot to bypass aid distribution coming through the southern parts of the Strip. Israeli security sources stated that the security establishment would like to coordinate the transfer of humanitarian aid through the Karni crossing with local actors on the ground in the Gaza Strip in order to facilitate the process and specifically to bypass both UN aid distribution, i.e. UNRWA, as well as bypassing Hamas. A security source that was quoted also stated that while this has been discussed in the War Cabinet, the execution is currently waiting for Prime Minister Netanyahu's approval. Other news, there are continuous reports of increasing diseases that are spreading through the refugee camps in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and reportedly this is exacerbated by an acute lack of clean water access in these areas. There's also growing hunger reported as pictures were circulated in the last several days of Palestinians attempting to collect flour that had dropped off an aid truck and carrying it off the ground. Other news, the Wall Street Journal reported today that humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip has substantially slowed in the last several weeks, citing several facets including Hamas and armed groups that are raiding trucks, Israeli attacks against convoys and distribution centers, Palestinian civilians who are also raiding trucks, as well as the protests in Israel that are blocking the Kerem Shalom crossing and Nitzana. It adds that last week there was an average of 65 trucks that entered the Gaza Strip each day, compared to 165 trucks on average several weeks ago. Other news, the New York Times published a study that was conducted by epidemiologists evaluating scenarios for the Gaza Strip. According to the study, if escalations in fighting occur, this will lead to some 85,000 Gazan deaths in the next 6 months as a result of both war and disease. If the fighting continues in the current level and the lack of humanitarian access also continues in the current level, this will lead to almost 60,000 Gazan deaths in the next 6 months, and if a ceasefire occurs and there's no outbreak of further diseases, this will lead to 6,500 deaths in the Gaza Strip in the next 6 months. Moving on to the West Bank, there was an organized settler attack that was reported for the third day in a row. In this instance, dozens of Israeli settlers from the Yitzhar settlement raided the Asira el-Kibilia village, throwing stones and torching several homes. The IDF forces reportedly entered the scene, and then the attackers dispersed. No arrests were made. Regarding IDF activity, substantial IDF activity reported in the areas of Jenin and Jenin refugee camp. I started reporting about this yesterday. That operation that I reported on yesterday lasted several hours. Many arrests were made. In the Azun village, the IDF also entered to search the area and confrontations erupted. A 14-year-old Palestinian was reportedly shot and killed in these confrontations. A total of 40 Palestinians were reported arrested throughout the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon. After yesterday's escalations continued today. There were barrages of rockets and mortars sent from Lebanon, targeting the areas of Shlomi, Avivim, where there was also directed from an anti-tank missile, Hardov, Metzuva, Hanita, Ya'ara. There was a substantial barrage of rockets towards the western Galilee. Rockets also targeted the areas of Even Menachem, Shomra, Metula, where there were also 2 direct hits of anti-tank missiles. Hezbollah claimed that it carried out over 13 attacks throughout the day, including 3 shooting attacks against IDF outposts and firing 2 Burkan missiles. There were also drone alerts that were reported in the areas of Malachia, Dishon, Ramon Naftali, and Iftach. Regarding IDF activity, warplanes reportedly carried out substantial attacks against 3 Hezbollah operational command centers. In addition, there were attacks that were noted against Hezbollah lookout posts in the area of El Hayam and Ramia, attacks against an outpost in the area of Zabkin village, attacks against Mar Jayun, artillery fire in Itaron, and attacks were also reported in the areas of Ita Sha'ab. Al-Ahbar reported that a drone attack was carried out in the Rondoria village. In addition, Lebanese news sources reported that a mother and daughter were killed in the IDF attack in the areas of Majd al-Zun region, and Al-Arab al-Jadid reported that 2 more people were injured in the Al-Masha area that was also attacked earlier in the day. Amidst these escalations, it was reported today that Hezbollah has again instructed its operatives to not use regular cell phones, noting that Israel has penetrated Hezbollah's communication system and will use them in order to target operatives. In Syria, there were several attacks that were reported in the last 24 hours. The Syrian Human Rights Observatory reported that a drone attacked a weapons warehouse belonging to an Iranian militia in the Al-Bukhamal area in the eastern parts of Syria. In addition, an attack was carried out against a residential building in the areas of Kfar Susa, that is in Damascus. According to the Voice of the Capital Radio in Damascus, the apartment that was attacked was used to be rented out to the families of Iranian commanders. However, they left the area in 2023, and the people who were killed in this attack were reportedly either 2 or 3 people, were in fact Syrian citizens. Hours after that attack, there was another attack that was reported in the areas of Adimas, in the outskirts of Damascus. It was not reported what was targeted in that attack. Moving on to some of the regional developments, UK MTO reported that a substantial explosion occurred in the Red Sea, 74 kilometers west of the Hudaydah port. There were no reports made of any ships that were hit, so it is unclear if this was a Houthi attack or possibly an attack of the coalition or what exactly happened there. In addition, local news sources in Yemen reported that 3 attacks were carried out by the coalitions in the Ras Isa region of the Hudaydah port. Again, it was not reported what was targeted. U.S. Central Command did not give any information about these attacks. Moving on to the political and general trends of the last 24 hours, the United Kingdom is considering stopping its weapons exports to Israel in the event of an IDF invasion in Rafah. Both Guardian and Bloomberg reported on this today, citing that the law in the United Kingdom allows for the quick suspension of arms deals if legal counselors determine that they are going to be used in violation of international law. Other news, speaking at the International Court of Justice today, when specifically the case in which the ICJ is reviewing the legality of Israel's occupation in the West Bank, the United States legal team of the U.S. State Department stated that any calls for Israel to withdraw its forces from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip must take into consideration Israel's security needs. Other news, Sweden announced today its intention to ban all Hamas activity in the country and to advance laws to limit any organization that is affiliated with Hamas. The legislation is supposed to be temporary and last for 5 years. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, the Israeli Knesset ratified the government's declarative statement from a few days ago against the establishment of a Palestinian state. The vote passed with an overwhelming majority of 99 to 11. Responding to this, the U.S. State Department spokesperson stated today that the U.S. administration will continue to push for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, adding, and I quote, "not just because we think it's in the interest of Palestinian people, but because we think it's in Israel's short, medium, and long-term security interests as well." He added later, "We will present to them the ideas and plans we are developing with our partners in the region, the commitment that other countries are willing to give to Israel's security, and every country will have to make its own decision about how it's going to proceed. Ultimately, Israel will have to make its own decisions, as every sovereign country does." Other news, Minister Gantz, who is not only a member of Israel's war cabinet, he is also, according to polls, favored to be Israel's next prime minister whenever elections do occur, stated today with regards to the potential of a future Palestinian state, and I quote, "After October 7th, it would be a mistake to give terrorism such wind in its sails. Political arrangements must be made directly between the parties, otherwise it will not be viable. In any future circumstances, Israel will maintain its security superiority and its ability to operate in the entire Gaza Strip. Our mission is 100% security control and 0% civilian control." So again, Minister Gantz is now embracing what Prime Minister Netanyahu has been saying, that Israel is going to maintain security control of the Gaza Strip. However, contrary to the coalition members of Netanyahu who are stating that Israel is going to have civilian control and develop settlements, Minister Gantz is saying, however, Israel will not maintain civilian control. Possibly this could maybe align with what the U.S. administration wants to create regarding a demilitarized Palestinian state. That remains to be seen. If you enjoy these reports, please do remember to subscribe, give a like. If you want to know when reports come out, please turn on notifications. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.